Hello, Connor.
Yes, hello.
First things first, I'm going to plug the Patreon, which this time actually has relevance to the greater episode that we're doing.
It does.
So, patreon.com/Genesis Evangelizani if you want to help us grow and expand and get better mics, which someone already has, but we can't for reasons. Just
Yes,
use it.
it took us an hour to set up this video for...
We were originally going to shoot a different video.
Yes.
Your Saranga Conundrum
We were
review
gonna
will have to wait.
Yeah, we'll have to do that another day, unfortunately. But that's alright, I don't really want to watch that episode today anyway. So, yeah.
We're here
We're here.
because we have someone who, on our Patreon, is part of the Master tier, I
Correct, the $10 or more tier.
believe. Yes.
And that means that you have pledged to us a significant amount.
Which we greatly appreciate.
Yes.
We really do.
Which will go into this channel. And rewarding that patron, we allowed him to request us a video to do as a reward for his generous donation.
Yes.
He made a request for a video for us to do, and he has requested us to discuss some of the experimental episodes of Doctor Who.
Yes, indeed.
Which is definitely always an interesting topic to discuss, considering this show has been around for so many years and has gone in so many different directions and experimented with so many different ideas.
the show in and of itself to begin with was rather experimental.
Exactly.
But then within the show itself, as it grew and evolved, to become more experimental within its own boundaries.
And that comes down to so many different things, such as being on the back foot of a bad budget, as well as writers with weird and creative ideas, and just sometimes trying something new to see what you can do.
Because Doctor Who is a toy box. Did we mention who it was? Cromwell.
Cromwell.
Thank you, Cromwell. We really appreciate it, and we hope you enjoy the video.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And we hope that this video shows what kind of dedication we have to people who support us. The fact that we will take time out of our day to reward our subscribers and patrons with a full video, not
just a little plug at the end saying thank you.
No, we want to fully reward you for
we want to reimburse you.
We want your experience with this channel to be everything that you hoped for.
Yes,
if we can.
Yes, as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And also, one little sort of little caveat I'd imagine for our request videos is specifically about Doctor Who, but sci-fi in general is probably okay, and other, but generally on that kind of line where it would fit in with what we do on the channel, just because this is going out to everyone, so we don't, we want it to be part of the channel. But that's,
because at some point we may dabble into other TV shows. Who knows? But
we do. Well, we do have plans for the spin-offs, but even beyond.
But
that,
I do think the heart of Genesis Evangelizani will always lie with the Whoniverse.
Well, it's in the name.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank everyone. We want to thank everyone who subscribes, and specifically our Patreons and you, Cromwell. We really appreciate your donation.
Yes. So if anyone else wants to request a video, that option is right there. The Master tier is for the upper class.
Yes. And potentially later we may have some other bonuses going on the Patreon, but we won't announce that just
but
yet
for now
until we can confirm.
But for now, there are the options.
Yes. All right. Now that incredibly long plug is out of the way. Well, actually, this whole video is a plug, really.
Pretty much.
Let's get into the topic. Experimental episodes and stories of Doctor Who. Starting with The Edge of Destruction.
The third story of Season 1. The Edge of Destruction, for those of you who don't know, comes in between two very expensive, for the time, stories, very iconic stories. The Daleks, 7-part sci-fi adventure that has changed the world.
Yep.
And
cemented icons in British pop culture.
And Marco Polo.
Yes.
Another 7-parter, which represents a sort of unique idea that Sidney Newman had for Doctor Who originally. I think Marco Polo as an episode is representative of what the original concept was.
The sort of mission statement.
Yeah, the educational historical.
Yes.
Both of those stories sucked the money out of the first season.
Yeah.
So in between those two stories, David Whittaker, the script editor, was assigned to write this little...
No relation to Jodie.
No,
I'm aware
no
of.
relation. David Whittaker, the script editor, who, by the way, is one of the best character writers that this show's ever seen, was assigned to write this small, low-budget 2-part story in between these mammoth 7-parters.
Yeah.
And what you get is one of the weirdest, craziest, and quite polarizing episodes of Doctor Who, where the first Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan are stuck in the TARDIS with nowhere to go.
Yeah.
When was the last time you watched this story?
A long time ago.
Right.
So I only sort of have faint memories of this episode. But I do remember enjoying it. And I remember it being incredibly atmospheric.
Yes, I would say this is kind of like a more bare bones, less intense version of Midnight without the alien, without the
direct threat.
There's no villain in The Edge of Destruction. But one thing I really like about it is it basically puts the 4 characters in a situation where they think they're all going to die.
Yeah.
And they start turning on each other.
Yeah.
I think Susan...
It's very much... Yeah.
And even though it wasn't known at the time yet, retroactively watching it, you can see the Time Lord attitude coming out of the Doctor and Susan.
The sort of elitist. Yeah, I do remember that actually. Where they
the Doctor is a fucking ass.
He has a disregard for Ian and Barbara. He just thinks nothing of them in terms of death.
He's just like, because Ian and Barbara are problem solvers. They're teachers. They're trying to find a way to fix this problem. And the Doctor's like, "You don't understand, Chesterton."
Yeah.
And
that's kind of like the asshole part of William Hartnell that he has a reputation for, those kind of episodes, and particularly this one.
And like he's got like a bandage on his head for the whole thing. There's like it's like a iconic image I have in my head of the first Doctor with a bandage on his head with blood, looking very pissed off at Ian and Barbara. And he's like, "This is all your fault. You're the reason why this happened."
Yeah.
And also Susan pulls a knife on, I think it's Barbara or Ian, I can't remember. I think it's Barbara.
Yeah. But
she goes a bit crazy in this episode.
It's great.
And I think the cliffhanger, I can't remember. It's been so long since I've seen it. It's been like over a year. But I think someone pulls a knife on the Doctor at the cliffhanger, like in between the 2 episodes. That's what I remember.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that the fast return switch was off, and that's the reason why the TARDIS wasn't working, is dumb. But the fact that we got to have a couple of episodes to explore these characters, I felt was crucial for the growth of this TARDIS team.
Absolutely, especially coming off such an iconic story and one that sort of changed pop culture in England as as it is today. Having this kind of more character-based, intimate story is... I mean, that's not an easy thing to write. I know, I've tried. It's not an easy thing to write that many... Well, not even that many, but big characters in a small environment.
Edge of Destruction is just an example of how ballsy Season 1 was.
Yeah. Because there were no rules.
Yeah.
They just did what they wanted to do and just went with it.
And there's one scene from the second episode that, for me, is like a defining moment for the first Doctor, and that's when he realizes, I can't remember the exact details, but basically, the TARDIS shakes to a point where all the characters are knocked out except for him, and he's standing there next to the console, and there's just a big black background. And the Doctor, it's like the first time in the show where the Doctor figures out, like, I think if you remember Tooth and Claw, when he realizes that the diamond is a trap for the wolf. Yeah. It's like that moment, but it's with the first Doctor. Like, it's the first time that the character had that light bulb moment. Yeah. And it's amazing. Yeah. Like, to see the first Doctor fully become that scientist wizard moment, and he's like, something about constellation and planets. Like, I love that scene. It's so brilliant. Yeah.
Have you anything more to say about the Edge of Destruction? I'm sure eventually, based on our plans, we will get to it. But
I think I recorded a review for it, but I didn't upload it. But that was back in the dark
Yeah.
ages of the channel. I'm sure at some point we'll get back to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Edge of Destruction is a really interesting piece of television.
Yeah.
It's
very atmospheric is what
it
I
is.
remember.
It is a weird one for sure.
Yeah. Probably not the best one to introduce yourself to the Hartnell era, but
no.
definitely one worth checking out.
Yeah, but it's a real nice in-between story. And yeah, I think it's one of those episodes that it's one of those ones you can watch multiple times.
Yes.
Because it has a lot of weight, a lot you can take from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, but it's as experimental goes, it's certainly a weird one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, we'll move on to our next experimental episode. Now, some people might not call this one experimental, but I think we can justify it being very much an experimental one based on the behind the scenes as well as the content of the episode. This is Boomtown.
From New Who Series 1.
Yep.
Now, similar to Edge of Destruction in a way, this comes in between two very popular iconic stories, The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, and Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways.
Yeah.
Two of the most popular stories of the new series.
Yeah.
And Boomtown is this weird little character.
Comic,
but also quite serious character piece
yeah.
that comes in between those two stories. And it's interesting because it's like you thought you like this is why I love Series 1 so much. You thought like every single point that you see the Ninth Doctor's character change throughout Series 1, you think to yourself, okay, I think I know this Doctor now. And then you get the next episode and it changes again, and then it changes again.
Yeah.
And then you get to Boomtown and it's like, this is one of the most deepest and layered Doctors ever. And it's literally his 11th episode.
Yeah, I know. Because the brilliant thing about the Ninth Doctor is he's so enigmatic, potentially more so than what Sylvester McCoy was at the end of his run. Because we had that whole, potentially, is he the other? Did he work with Omega and Rassilon? Is there that whole thing, the Cardinal Master Plan? And didn't we have trouble with the prototype? That whole thing. But then Eccleston came off the Time War, and that was a mysterious thing as well as
a whole new idea.
Yeah, and there was this new angle, and the Doctor clearly had more edge to him and more visceral anger than possibly ever before.
Yeah.
And in Boomtown, you can tell he's become a survivor. I think this is like Dalek brings survival up, not the episode survival, but the idea of surviving and survival. But that's more about an inner conflict between two old enemies and just the personal stakes of that. Whereas in Boomtown, through quite comic means in that little dinner scene, you get to see the Doctor is well equipped now to just with such disregard just protect himself, and he's potentially willing to execute someone because the whole dilemma is, will he send her to her death?
Yeah.
Which is, and at this point we don't know what the Ninth Doctor will do, and the fact that kind of the big exciting confrontation in this episode is a dinner scene.
And
but not even like a big dramatic dinner scene. It's literally just two people having a chat and some wine.
And another thing I love about Boomtown in retrospect is it's the Ninth Doctor's penultimate story. And it's kind of, as a Doctor, I find him to be a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
Like, usually when someone thinks best Doctor, they tend to gloss over Eccleston because
They're wrong.
Because he doesn't have as much TV time as others.
Yeah.
But what I love about Boomtown as symbolism is it kind of represents what he is as a Doctor. Is he's one of the greatest Doctors, but you don't realize it.
Yeah.
And Boomtown is an episode that I feel like a lot of people, they don't look into it far enough to realize how good it is.
And that's the thing about Boomtown that's kind of experimental in the term that it's, I mean, you could take it for the budgetary reasons as well, but it's quite a stripped back episode.
Yeah.
It starts with the three companions and the Doctor in Cardiff, and then a villain from a previous episode shows up, and it seems like pretty standard fare.
Yeah.
But then it just sort of, it becomes this moral dilemma about execution and life and death, and this whole sort of subtext with the Ninth Doctor that's been there throughout his whole series.
Yeah.
and has been text at points, but like you kind of really start seeing how the Night Doctor's cog's working just before he regenerates.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So Boomtown, I think, in terms of it being, it's probably on the list we've got here. It's the most traditional episode.
On the surface, yes.
But it does have a lot of quite experimental subtext, and in terms of like the behind the scenes and stuff, you can go watch our review of it with Jake, because we actually go more into detail there.
And we were pleasantly happy to find out that Jake also agrees with us that Boomtown means more to Series 1 than most people give it credit for.
I mean, in terms of the overall theme, means more to Series 1 than the Empty Child and the Dr. Dances.
Yeah, Empty Child and Dr. Dances is a brilliant story.
Oh, you don't get me wrong.
But it's its own thing.
Yeah,
really.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I guess with that, we shall move on to the next episode, unless you have anything more to add about Boomtown.
Yeah, my feelings on Boomtown are fairly similar to Edge of Destruction, except I think because it's made in with. Before I move on, actually, one thing I will mention is Russell T Davies wrote that script at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
It was written in 2005.
Yeah, the year that it was debuting.
The series aired 4 months after it was written. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, because normally there's at least 6 months.
And you would think, with Eccleston having already left the show in his mind, that he had to go back and do this episode, that he would phone it in.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
Because Eccleston is a brilliant actor.
He's outstanding in it. It's unbelievable, like the fact that even though at that point in time he was done with Doctor Who, he still put 100% into his performance.
Yeah.
And you have to give him credit for that.
It's crazy. Yeah, he's truly wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to our next story. Planet of the Giants.
Yes. Now, Planet of the Giants is an interesting one because it was originally a 4-parter.
Mm-hmm.
And then Verity Lambert looked at it and said, that's too long, cut it down to 3. Now, we saw something interesting similarly with the Dominators. When we watched the Dominators, you will not. There we go, there's Tony.
Oh, spoilers.
The Dominators was a 6-parter that was cut to a 5.
Yeah.
And what the problem with that was all the cliffhangers felt terrible because they didn't have a natural end. The story just ended.
Yeah.
At almost every point that there was a cliffhanger, it just ended.
Yeah.
However, Planet of Giants, for an episode that was filmed and edited down, has some of my favourite cliffhangers in all of Doctor Who. Though there's the one where they are faced with a giant cat. And there's also the one where they are stuck in a bathroom sink and the owner...
I remember that.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, like on ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, that's the one, they'd play old Hartnell and Troughton episodes like every Friday night, I think. And my earliest memory is of the Sensorite, specifically the episode 1 cliffhanger with the Sensorite rising through the window.
Yeah.
That's burnt into my brain. But another one that was burnt into my brain was them being in the sink in Planet of the Giants.
Yeah. Now, Planet of Giants as an experimental episode, especially for the time.
Yeah.
I can't exactly remember what the word is, but it's an episode where the characters shrink. So they are miniature in a normal world.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in episodes like Invisible Enemy and Into the Dalek.
Yeah, it's like the Voyage something or other where they go inside the body. It's an old science fiction
story. There's an episode
story,
of the Magic School Bus where they go inside one of the kids' bodies.
Yeah.
It's like that too.
Yeah. And there's an episode of the Mighty Boosh where they do that as well.
This episode shouldn't have worked. Like, with the low budget that they had and the ambition, like, the actual special effects that goes into making this episode is something that shouldn't have been, like, successful at all. But, like, even though you can tell it's not real and then, like, they're in front of a green screen, for some reason it just works.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is the production design is amazing. Like, the way they managed to make things that are this big for us, and then they build something, like, so that it's equivalent to size.
Yeah.
Like I think there's one. It's I can't remember what it is, but it's I think it's like a matchbox.
Yes.
But like it's basically planks of wood, and they all have to lift it, like 3 of them at the same time,
Yeah.
and they have to run it across a matchbox to try and light it, and they can't do it because they're too small.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that kind of thing. Like, Planet of Giants is one of those episodes that I just love the creativity of it.
Yeah, it's such a creatively expressive episode from the production standpoint.
Yeah.
And in terms of it being experimental, the budget they had doing a story like this, like today's budget, this would probably wouldn't even be that impressive in the episode.
No.
But on a 1960s BBC budget,
Yeah.
that's extraordinary what they achieved.
Yeah.
It was a big risk.
Yeah. And Planet of Giants is, before I saw it, was an episode I used to see near the bottom of a lot of lists.
Yeah.
And then I watched it and I was like, why?
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, it is.
This is so interesting. Like, I've never seen a Doctor Who episode like this at all. And I don't think there's any other episode that's even like it. It's so unique.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's got
really
that
good.
magical
That twinkle.
twinkle, that fantasy sort of charm to it, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I love a lot about the Verity Lambert era, is that every episode feels like something completely different.
Mm.
And I think that's why the show is still around
Well,
today.
because as I was saying, especially the first season of Hartnell,
Yeah, and the second as well.
all bets were off. They could do whatever the hell they wanted, within reason, obviously. But
Yeah,
in terms of the ideas, there was so much potential, and they
Yeah.
went with it.
yeah, and I love how Planet of Giants was a series opener as well.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't pick any safe option. They said, no, we'll chuck the most experimental
Yeah.
thing possible as the first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Cool. Now we're gonna. He chose this one.
It's experimental.
You're not wrong. Do you want to tell them what it is?
Yeah, I'm not mistaken. Love and Monsters. The first Dr. Light story of the new series. And I think originally it was going to be the long game. They were going to do a story from Adam's perspective, but Russell changed that at the and did what he did. So Love and Monsters, yeah. Where do I begin with Love and Monsters? An episode that's from the perspective of side characters,
Who we've never seen before.
we've never seen before. I'm struggling to think of where to begin because there's so much stuff to talk about.
The monster
Oh,
was created by a 6 or 7-year-old kid,
yeah.
which is so neat. That's such an awesome thing that they did.
Yeah. If I was 7 and I drew something and it went on Doctor Who, I'd be so happy.
Also, that kid had a great imagination to come up with something as disgusting as the Absorbaloff.
Yeah, because I just would have been like Spaceman. You know, I wouldn't have think it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Absorbaloff is a kid's drawing brought to life. There is no doubt about that.
And Peter Kay's performance, is it Peter Kay?
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter Kay's performance is so entertaining. I don't care what anyone says. He makes that episode worth watching purely because of how hammy he is.
Especially Victor Kennedy as well.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Absorbaloff is a kid's creation, but the human form, Victor Kennedy, is very much a campy Russell T Davies character. Like, that is...
He's sort of the only, in my eyes, the only sort of salvageable part of the episode.
I can imagine him. I think because obviously Russell thought he saw this big green thing and thought, okay, he's going to be part of the Slitheen family sort of thing, where Clom next to Rex Corica Valabatorius. So he thought, okay, why don't we do the same thing where there is a human form, and basically Peter Kay fits into that same category as the people who played the Slitheen in Aliens of London. It's that same kind of
like. Who, me? Kind of very coy.
But what I like about it is, because obviously the Slitheen were a satire of politicians, whereas the way I see Peter Kay, he's basically, I'm not sure if everyone can relate to this, but not just Doctor Who, but fandoms in general, you will get a group of fans, and you will have, usually, especially with Doctor Who, you'll have a group of people who are very creative and wacky and artistic, And what was the group called from Love and Monsters? Linda, that's right. What does it stand for again? Is it? Oh, it was something funny. But you remember, I think there was one that did like a sculpture, and then there was one that they played music together. But like all these characters had you will see when you look at Doctor Who fandoms, you will see these people exist like in real life. These people that have so much passion for the show, and they create these art. There's amazing,
beautiful pieces
of art, and just like costume design and like replicating
music. Like, some people's music on YouTube is insanely good.
And then like people make like fan-made trailers and all that. Yeah. That's kind of for me what Linda sort of represents. But then you get Peter Kay, who is the fan that takes it too far, who makes the talking and watching the show a chore. This is a guy who says, no, we're not going out for cups of tea and not talking about the show. We're going to sit down all day, every day, and talk about the show, talk about the Doctor, find the Doctor. Like, he's literally that guy who makes Doctor Who unenjoyable for you. And I've not just Doctor Who, but other fandoms as well. I've encountered these kinds of people, and they ruin the experience for you. And that's, I feel like, what Peter Kay was representing in that episode. And then, for me, the brilliant thing about the fact that he is the Absorbaloff is when people start to fight back against these horrendously obsessed fans saying, no, this isn't fun anymore, he screams, turns into a big green monster, and sucks you in and has a northern accent and starts just being absolutely horrible and disgusting, and it turns into a nightmare disaster. I find that so funny.
It's not. I don't think it's a good episode, but by God, is it funny? Yeah. It's very, very funny.
I really like the way Love and Monsters writes a story based on Doctor Who fans and side characters. Because I think another thing is about Love and Monsters is so Doctor Who over the years has known for having a lot of disposable side characters. Like there's just a whole bunch that you get introduced to, and then after the episode's over, they're thrown away and forgotten about, never seen again. So Love and Monsters is like, well, why don't we do an episode from the perspective of these side characters? You know, put a different spin on it. So I like the way Russell wrote that episode in that way. And also, it also does the whole what's it called, vlogging? It's vlogging, right? Yeah, Elton's vlogging, which is it's again it's the same cringy vlogging shit you always see. And it's kind of before its time, because obviously this is before YouTube was a big thing.
Just as YouTube was starting.
But whenever I see vloggers on YouTube, I always think of Elton and Love and Monsters. It's so cringy. It's like no one's ever gonna watch this. You're just a nutter who lives in a flat, and your life's not that interesting. But
yeah, I got a moment of panic when Woman Who Fell to Earth opened with Ryan that.
God.
I was like, oh no! But luckily, Chibnall was wise enough not to do that.
Yeah,
fellow kids.
Yeah. Oh god, and the well, I mean that's a bit different because Woman Who Fell to Earth is a series opener, whereas Love and Monsters, as we have said. Very experimental, out of the way episode that has nothing to do with anything.
Well, you can tell it's experimental because there's suggestion of skull fucking a slab of concrete.
Yes, of course there is.
In a family show.
Yes. Oh God, Russell T Davies is a sick bastard.
All right, moving on to the Space Museum.
The Space Museum. Often cited as the worst Hartnell story on many fan polls. Now, episode 1. I think what we should do is we need to separate the Space Museum into two halves. Because there's episode 1 and then there's the rest of the story, and they're completely different stories. Now, if you want a full defense of the Space Museum by the lovely Rob Sherman, go on YouTube, search up Rob Sherman Space Museum, and you'll find it. He basically, in magical words, explains exactly what you're missing from this story if you don't like it. It's not a perfect story by any means, but, I think if Rob Sherman gives it a seal of approval, then you can too.
Oh, hail the mighty one.
Yeah. Now, episode 1 of the Space Museum is one of the most interesting and fascinating episodes of Doctor Who ever. It's feels like something out of the Twilight Zone, where you've got glasses unbreaking. You've got this museum in space of all these things in space.
Yeah.
Kind of gives this big depth to the universe.
Yeah,
that
it's a
we're
big
living in.
sort of lore building.
It's in the second season, and it's already parodying itself. Like, this story is breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Saying that Daleks are a relic already.
Yeah.
And they've only appeared twice.
Yeah.
The fact that the episode 1 cliffhanger, the TARDIS team walk into a museum and see themselves inside glass
That's
cabinets
cool, yeah.
is fucking awesome. I think that episode 1 of the Space Museum is like a near perfect episode.
Yeah.
Then you get the rest of the story, where this is where people tend to lose it. The entire rest of the Space Museum is a piss take of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Basically what happens is people run around corridors and don't have conclusions to any plot points. But that's the point. Like, the fact that nothing gets solved is why it's written that way. So basically the point I was trying to make is the Space Museum is a story that people don't understand because it is a parody of the show itself.
Yeah.
But when people are watching it, they may not realize that.
Especially because it's so early on within the show's life
Yeah.
that people who are going back and watching the Hartnell era are just like, this is... What? Why is this happening? What's going on? Not realizing it is already making fun of the tropes that would become ingrained in Doctor Who many years after this episode aired.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Yeah.
It's a very self-aware watch,
Yeah.
and even then I can understand why people might not like that in Doctor Who, and that's fine. But when people are confused by it, and that's why they don't like it, I think they just need to understand that this is a parody. It's a satire of itself.
And like, because people will be like, well, this is a terrible story because all of the plot points are reversing on themselves. Like, they're like, when we watch an episode of Doctor Who, we tend to see this happen, and then that's resolved by that, right? There's certain structure to episodes that you see, formulas, right? The Space Museum intentionally goes against all of those formulas. It's basically an episode that blue balls itself for like 3 episodes, and that's why people like don't like it, because it's so jarring to watch. But that's the point.
Absolutely.
It's supposed to be jarring. There's all these different plot threads that are set up in dialogue that are never mentioned again.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And even though I would say it's probably my least favorite of the second season, I still really enjoy it for what it is.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's very... If you're willing to give way to its self-satire, it's a really entertaining watch.
Yeah. And I think saying it's the worst Hartnell story is wrong. Because I would prefer a weird experimental parody of itself than something that's straight-faced and boring, like The Smugglers, for example.
Or something that's a comedy episode in the middle of a big epic, and then it breaks the fourth wall at the end.
Oh, Feast of Stephen.
Feast of Stephen.
Oh dear, I considered having that on this list, but yeah, that's a missing episode.
It is experimental, in much the same way that the opening of...
They walk into a police station and run away, and then they transport to a guy who's filming a movie, and then they run into that and fuck up the film, then run away, and then William Hartnell says Merry Christmas.
To you all at home too.
That is an episode of Doctor Who that happened.
Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. Alright, moving on. 42.
The funny thing about 42 is, it's experimental by not being experimental.
It is the most formulaic, generic, not necessarily bad.
It's the most okay episode of Doctor Who ever.
But what makes it experimental is the fact that it has this timer gimmick, which Stu Bagfull pointed out does not line up with the time code of the episode.
No, which makes it pointless.
Yeah.
The fact that there is a countdown means that the first 40 minutes of this episode are pointless because you know it's not going to get resolved till the end.
But it is very entertaining because the Doctor does sciencey stuff and Martha runs around
But that's every episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
What about 42 is different to any other episode?
We basically slipped this in just so we could bash Chibnall a bit.
Well, the thing is, the guy Cromwell who suggested us to do this video listed 42 as one of the experimental episodes.
Because he's not wrong. It is an experimental gimmick. It's just that, unfortunately, Chibnall's writing undercuts his own gimmick.
Yep.
It just, at least in my eyes. I mean, if someone else finds something much more entertaining in it, that's fantastic.
Well, I'm not saying it's not entertaining. I enjoy watching it.
Oh, I do too. There's not a single episode of Series 3 I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
Fight me.
But 42, like, it's just vanilla Doctor Who. That's all it is. There's nothing to it outside of being everything that Doctor Who already is.
Yeah, it's a very bread and butter, just...
Basically, it's anti-experimental. That's what it is.
Despite having an experimental gimmick, it is not.
Yeah. It's experimental by not being experimental.
And we'll get more into it once we get back into the main series, and we can properly dissect its fineness.
Yeah. And it's also an episode that... Because a lot of 10th Doctor episodes tend to be like, okay, let's come up with a really ballsy idea to take the Doctor's character in a direction we've never seen before. 42's one of the only ones that doesn't. It's like...
His eyes are going to burn, and he's going to go, ah.
He's like, Christian was like, okay, the 10th Doctor, what does he do? He shouts and grits his teeth and yells.
Happy Prime.
Yep.
It's...
Burn with me.
42.
And then they hit a reverse button and it all ends. They dump the oil. None of the side characters are memorable.
Nope.
The best part of that episode is something that Russell wrote, which was the Saxon stuff.
Yeah.
It's alright.
It's just, whatever.
It's the most alright piece of television I've probably ever seen.
Mission to the Unknown.
Here we go. Now they're more interesting. Now this is some good shit. Right, Mission to the Unknown is the shortest Doctor Who story of all time. It's only 25 minutes long. It's a one-part prequel to Dalek's Master Plan. It doesn't.
That's right. Yes.
Now, this is probably out of all on this list, this might be the most experimental episode on it, because no Doctor, no companions, no TARDIS.
That's right. I don't know. I may not have seen this.
You have. I think I linked you the animation done by Ian Levine. It's on YouTube.
Yes.
It's outstanding. Mission to the Unknown is an episode where two strangers we've never met before investigate a ruin in a forest, and then everyone dies because Daleks are there. It's
basically a 20-minute cold open for a massive saga that's coming up.
It's Terry Nation at his absolutely most creative genius. Like Mission to the Unknown, I wouldn't say it's like a 10 because it can't be.
Yeah.
Like doesn't have the ambition or length to be a 10.
Yeah.
But as a prequel, it's pretty darn perfect.
It's like as I said, it's the cold open to the Daleks' Master Plan.
Exactly.
It's almost not its own story, but in doing that, that's what makes it.
And one thing I love about it is it doesn't come right before Dalek's Master Plan either. It's so obviously you get the series opener Galaxy 4.
Yeah.
Then you get Mission to the Unknown, one episode.
Yeah.
Then you get 4 episodes of the Mythmakers.
Yeah.
That story sends off Vicky. Then you get the Daleks Master Plan. This little seed, like this is one of the first examples of an episode designed to set you up for a series arc.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I love Mission to the Unknown. If you haven't seen it, 25 minutes.
Check it out.
25 minutes. It's on YouTube. Free to watch. Animation's gorgeous. It's unbelievable. Mission to the Unknown. One of the most coldest, darkest, shortest episodes ever. It's just
brilliant. Condensed brilliance.
Yeah, it's the perfect way to introduce Daleks into a season.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Rob Sherman in series 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so different. No other episode of Doctor Who is even remotely like Mission to the Unknown.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Moving on. Blink.
Right. Would we say at this point that Blink is probably the most famous episode of Doctor Who?
Yep.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere you go, everywhere you see, anyone who's never watched the show before has seen this episode.
They know they know Don't Blink.
Yeah,
They
Weeping
picture
Angels.
David Tennant on the monitor.
And the Weeping Angels.
Yep. And they're icons. Moffat created another cultural icon.
Yeah, they're as popular as every other Doctor Who villain.
Because when people list iconic Doctor Who monsters, Daleks, Cybermen, Weeping Angels.
Yep.
People will go to the Weeping Angels before they go to the Zygons, before they go to the Sontarans, before they go to anything else.
Yeah.
The Weeping Angels are up there in the general public's eyes of Doctor Who pantheon of monsters.
And it's because of Blink.
Yeah.
It's, in my opinion, it's like a flawless 45 minutes of TV. Like
it's so tight.
Yeah.
It's everything. Set up, payoff, set up, payoff, set up,
Yeah.
payoff. You get the payoff before you get the setup, and then you get the payoff for that. It's just...
And the way it managed, like, one of the things that... Because everyone mentions how scary the angels are, everyone mentions how awesome the time travel aspect of it is, everyone mentions how cool the characters are and how great the acting is. One thing that I love about Blink that people tend to not mention is the way it manages to establish atmosphere in a regular town.
Yeah.
Like, you feel this world within this small town.
You feel Sally Sparrow's sort of angst that she kind of always feels like something's breathing down her neck.
Yeah.
It's just like a subconscious thing. But like when she goes to the police station and she just, if I'm remembering this correctly, she goes out and she thinks there was a statue there that's moved.
Yeah.
I can't remember if that's actually, but like I remember in that scene, you feel her tension.
Yeah.
And then going into the car park alone and the fact that that's so cold and dank, and then you get that funny and lovely charming scene with because life is short and you are hot. And then
I love that character.
Yeah.
Both versions, young and old.
he's in maybe 7 minutes of the episode
Yeah.
and we get his whole life.
Blink is an absolutely outstanding piece of television.
Yeah.
People say it's overhyped because everyone says it's the best episode. Like,
Yeah.
no, it's not. Even though everyone talks about it and loves it, if you're trying to tell me that Blink is not a good episode, you're out of your fucking mind.
And if you think Stephen Moffat is not a good writer, then you're wrong. Blink is perfect television.
Yeah.
It's condensed
It's
perfection.
undeniable, objectively amazing storytelling. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
And even if it's not your favorite episode, you just can't deny that it's famous for a reason.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I remember I was lucky enough to watch it on original broadcast as well. Just so lucky.
So did I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we'll get to Blink in the main series again, and we'll probably deconstruct it. But if you have not seen Blink yet, why?
I'm pretty sure everyone who's watched this video has seen it.
You better have.
Pretty much everyone who hasn't watched this video has seen it. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why it's one of the most famous episodes of television ever. It's just outstanding. It's the perfect example of experimental episode.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's brilliant. And the Doctor's barely in it.
Yeah. But
He plays a part.
he's such a great presence, and it's
Yeah.
one of Tennant's best performances.
Yeah.
And he's barely in it at
He's
all.
probably about 10 minutes of screen time.
Tennant frozen on a screen in that woman's house
Yeah.
has presence. It's
It's-
unbelievable.
It's
Blink is
extraordinary.
just. Oh,
Yeah.
I
Brilliant.
could gush over that episode all day, but we'll save it for the
Yeah.
review.
Anyway,
I mean, when we get to the Blink review, I'm just gonna kiss its ass for an hour. So
just expect that. All right, moving on. We'll try to keep this as pacey as we can because timing.
yeah.
But the Celestial Toymaker.
Oh my god, the Celestial Toymaker is one of the most mixed episodes in Doctor Who. 4 episodes, and they're all completely different.
Mm-hmm.
When I watched it, basically my opinion on the Celestial Toymaker is this. It's a 4-parter. 2 of the episodes are some of the most enjoyable Heart and Alera stuff I've ever seen, and the other 2 are some of the worst Doctor Who I've ever seen. It's a weird story. Celestial Toymaker is is so, especially because it's 3 of those episodes are missing as well. Like having to try and imagine what's going on is crazy. This is also a story where the first Doctor is invisible for most of it. I think they may be down to Hartnell's health issues, but
Was this season 3?
yes.
I think there was a lot of shots behind the Doctor stand-in, someone wearing the wig.
Yeah. Yeah, Celestial Toymaker is a bizarre episode. But one thing that is consistent throughout it that is absolutely amazing, and the reason why everyone knows this story, is Michael Gough as the Toymaker. He is so good.
I'll cancel the pizzas.
In lost episodes with free, what's it called? Stills.
Yeah. Telly
Telesnaps. Or if you watch the animated version that people have done, his presence is so great. He's better as a telesnap than he is in Arc of Infinity as a Time Lord. I love the Toymakers. It's such a great idea for a character.
Yeah.
And like I said about the Hartnell era, I love the way it experiments with ideas. The fact that they get stuck in this place where they can't time travel, and they have to play through all these weird little games.
Yeah.
And it's full. The side characters in the Celestial Toymaker are out of this world. Like episode 3, even if it is probably one of the worst episodes of Doctor Who ever, is absolutely bonkers. Like I don't even remember like the details, but Dodo and Steven run into this kitchen and someone runs up to them and goes. It's one of those episodes.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give it a rewatch because I remember bits and pieces, but I need to...
I think episode 4 was probably my favorite. They go on, Dodo and Steven have to like, they're basically playing, it's almost like this version of Snakes and Ladders where they have to jump on these different boxes.
Yeah.
But the guy who's commanding them is like tricking them, trying to get them to trip over their own path.
Yeah.
It's
like the Master and the Five Doctors with the Cybermen.
I reckon I would have loved that story had I been 5 years old when it broadcast.
Yeah.
Like it seems like the kind of thing that I would have loved at that age.
It's very off the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's
magical. Yeah.
Very good word for it.
Have you actually seen the Celestial Toymaker?
Yes, but again, with most of Hartnell's stories, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because like the most recent ones I've seen are the Gunfighters, Sensorites, Dalek Invasion, Unearthly Child.
Right. Yeah. Because obviously only episode 4 exists of Celestial Toymaker, so I imagine you probably would have only seen that one if it was on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Or because I think I've watched like a Telesnap one like a couple years back.
Yeah.
But I've never,
because it is on. It's Loose Cannon's done one and all that.
Yeah. So I have listened to or seen a version of it at some point.
Yeah. But it is a very divisive story.
From memory, I can see why, and also from your description.
It's divisive within my own opinion, because as I said, half of it's so fun. And the other half is so not.
Yeah. Who wrote it?
I don't even remember. I'll probably put it on screen, but
this person here.
Yeah.
All right. Have you said your piece about the Celestial?
I think so. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Now we move on to Midnight.
Midnight is one of the greatest pieces of television of all time.
It is perfection.
It's so good. Russell T Davies wrote this script in 4 days when he was doing his grocery shopping, and he thought no one would like it. Is he the Vincent van Gogh of modern television?
Possibly. He's
Midnight is an episode that is designed for not everyone to like. I know some people that don't get Midnight because they like traditional Doctor Who. Midnight is the perfect episode for wanky hipsters that like to film themselves on camera like us. It's probably the best exploration of the 10th Doctor's character we've ever seen. Maybe even the Doctor's character as a whole.
It's hard for me to talk about this episode without outright mentioning the fact this is my favorite episode of New Who.
Mm.
It is extraordinary. Everything about it is so good. It is the only episode of New Who that ever since I was a child and still to this day creeps me out. When Sky's just looking at them out of focus in the background and you can see her mouthing along.
Yeah.
That just, like, you could show me a deformed face in a horror film and I'd be like, those are cool special effects. But just Sky and that actress's piercing eyes just get so under my skin. Not only is it a great experimental episode where it's more about the Doctor's fears and just completely losing control and being in an environment where typically the 10th Doctor, typically the 10th Doctor would thrive.
This episode is perfect for him.
Yeah.
Like, this episode would still be like a 10 out of 10 with other Doctors in it, but this episode is so perfect for the 10th Doctor.
It's to see him start out thinking like, oh, I'm going to control them with my typical like uncompliant, like fingers on lips kind. He doesn't say that, but that kind of attitude. And then they're all like, "You're an alien.
Yeah,
Get out."
I love how Midnight is a subversion of the 10th Doctor's era.
And I literally just got chills down my spine thinking, one of my favourite moments of watching Doctor Who ever is my parents, my sister and I watching Midnight, and Sky and the Doctor are speaking at the same time. We're like, oh, they must have rehearsed for so long for this. And then she spoke slightly before him. And my dad was like, oh, that was a bit of a misstep. And then the penny dropped and we were all like, oh, that was deliberate. And then, like, it was just, it was so unsettling.
And then Tennant just like...
He's like, I can't remember the exact words, but it's just like, I'm free. Don't listen to...
free.
And you can see the fear...
Don't listen to me.
And the veins in his eyes and the fear, the complete lack of control.
His eyebrows like start to raise because he's like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, and like he knows like if he gets thrown out on the Midnight Planet, he's not going to regenerate. He's just going to be vaporized.
It is the closest that the Doctor ever got to dying for real. Like not regenerating, dying. Yeah. Like forever.
Yeah, because he didn't know that mystery was unknown, and then you had the little typical Gareth Roberts running gag of, you know, one of the companions will say something, and the Doctor will be like, "No, don't do that." But in this one, it's completely recontextualized in terms of he's like, "No, don't do that."
Yeah.
Seriously, don't. And you can just see like the mood dies, and the fact that the Midnight Entity isn't defeated by the Doctor. Like, the Midnight Entity is technically defeated, but it is still out there. It just had a feed.
And
all that
another
happened
thing,
to it is it just went outside.
Another thing I love is this episode was the most dangerous point in the Doctor's life in terms of his like life being threatened. But he was so scared by it that he doesn't want to tell anyone what happened. Like at the end of that episode, I don't remember exactly the dialogue, but I don't think he tells Donna exactly what. Like he vaguely
alludes to it. We don't hear the whole conversation,
but he is so scared by this monster that he doesn't want to tell even his loved ones that this happened to him.
He can't verbalize it. Like, that Midnight Entity is a bigger threat than Davros at the end, threatening the whole reality.
Yeah.
Because
like,
what is the show?
Midnight is so brilliant that it undermines other great episodes because it's so brilliant.
Yeah, it's just condensed perfection.
Yeah.
And then you have Patrick Troughton's son in there. David, I think it's David Troughton.
Yeah. And even the light-hearted section of the story before the thing crashes, like, he's just on a bus talking to a bunch of people eating.
And they're likable.
They're like, is that chicken or pork? No, I think it's both.
Yeah. And then, like,
and I love the transitions as well, like the way it like goes between scenes and like.
Oh, and another great little horror moment is the driver. So he's like, oh, how thick's that glass?
Yeah.
Why don't we just... The Doctor typically doing his doctory thing. Why don't we just have a peek? And then just as the shutter is going down, the left-hand driver, the co-pilot goes, did you see it? It's there! And then it shuts, and you don't get to see it. Like, I'm literally getting goosebumps right now thinking about that moment. It's just horrific. Yeah. And then bang, bang, bang on the side of it. It's... I cannot wait till we get to it in the
And I think the worst part about it was, especially for us, because in New Zealand we have ad breaks when we watch television. When I first watched that episode, it had ad breaks, and it broke the tension for me.
Yeah.
Midnight is an episode that you need to watch 45 minutes all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't break it up. You've just got to sit and experience it. All right, I think we should
Anyone
move
who
on.
says that Russell T Davies is not a good writer is wrong, because Midnight is absolutely fucking perfect.
And so is another one he wrote, which is coming up later in the list.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on to The Mind Robber.
Oh, The Mind Robber, Ryan Robber. Okay, this comes right after The Dominators. The Mind Robber is... Now, this is interesting. The Mind Robber was a 4-part story that was stretched out to 5 parts.
Oh.
But it is so fun to watch. The Mind Robber is an episode, I think the first episode of it was done on $0 budget.
Yeah, because that's the one.
I think they even lost money because they had to pay the actors. They had to use monsters from another TV show.
That's right.
The Mind Robber is a wonderfully creative story. It does things like trapping the companions inside a book.
Yeah.
It removes Jamie's face and replaces it with another actor because what's his name? Fraser Hines was ill, so they just did that. The Doctor walks into a room and a bunch of children surround him, and he's like, "What the hell's going on?" It's The Mind Robber is so fun.
I kind of don't want to say too much about it because if people haven't seen it, I kind of
Yeah.
want them just to not know what's coming and just
Yeah.
experience the
It's
weirdness.
bonkers.
Yeah.
It's so bonkers.
Yeah. Real entertaining though.
Yeah.
Like it. It's.
And I remember, it's probably, I think it's even though Zoe had been introduced 2 episodes earlier in The Wheel in Space, it's kind of like the episode where she comes into her own because she actually gets a bit of focus because obviously this is a story that was stretched out to 5 parts.
Yeah.
So they decided to focus a lot on the characters in that one,
Yeah.
as well as all the fun. The Mind Robber is similar to some of these other ones, especially 60 stories, is just an experimental fun episode that is enjoyable from start to finish.
Yeah, brilliant.
And
Go check it out.
I haven't seen it since 2013, but I remember it so vividly.
Yeah.
And I'd love to. Next time I watch it, I want to watch it on the channel. Like I want to live it again.
Yeah, I have a feeling after we're done with the worst of, we'll probably still do Classic Who stuff. So
Yeah.
don't panic.
Mind Robber is one I'd love to watch with Jake. Actually,
Yes.
I feel like he'd enjoy it.
Yeah, because he's a weirdo. No,
But
he's
yeah, if
great.
you haven't seen The Mind Robber, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it is. Go check it
Yeah.
out. Turn left.
1 week after midnight, Russell T Davies again writes one of the greatest episodes of Doctor Who.
I remember as a kid thinking, oh, they're not going to go any darker than they did last week.
Turn left, we get the polar opposite, where the Doctor gets taken out of the story and dies in an alternate universe. And we get Catherine Tate, a campy comedian who had a fan base of people that were watching her for comfort food television. Gets one of the most emotional, dramatic episodes of television I've ever seen, and it's one of the best acting performances from a comedian of any. It's to this day, talking about Turn Left is just, I get this deep feeling because it's one of those episodes that has stuck with me.
One of my, the best way to talk about Turn Left is the little moments.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when the family are putting away on the bus, and he says, no, it's good. They're going to make us go to camp. They're going to make us work. They're going to make us work. And then they're going off and waving, and as soon as they're on the truck, he's cuddling his family, kissing him, and Will says, oh God, it's happening again.
And you realise that this is a reference to Nazism, which is one, in real life, is one of the most heartbreakingly sad moments in human history. The fact that we have gotten to the point where we want to murder each other because of difference. And in this alternate universe without the Doctor, our human race has lost itself to the point where Nazism becomes something again.
And And it's this thing of, like, it's the implication because it's a family show, but regardless, they're going to a camp. That it's population control. It's hideous. And then obviously there's the Sontaran's victory with blowing up the sky, and then that kills Torchwood. All of them, including Jack. And then Sarah Jane dies on the moon. Everyone. And then bloody... And then
Russell T Davies, in Turn Left, eliminated any possible plot hole by addressing every single thing we'd seen from the new series from 2005 to 2008. Everything that happened on Earth is addressed in Turn Left so that it has continuity.
And I love the fact that this episode about the companion whose theme's the and she's a bubbly, fun, quirky, feisty companion. She gets all sorts of fucked up in this story. And like her mum, the scene, she's just like, I don't know if there's any hope for you anymore, Donna. And like, and things like that. It's like sickening, but I can't look away. And then Rose comes back, but it's not done like in a big heroic, yay, here's Rose. That'll come next week. But in this one, Rose is just like, no, yeah, things are going really wrong. We need you, Donna. We need you to get to... And then the greatest New Who cliffhanger possibly ever.
Except for maybe the one that happened the week after.
Except for that, maybe. Yeah. True.
Oh, Series 4's cliffhangers are just outstanding.
Yeah, Series 4 is just... Oh, those... Yeah, we'll get to Turn Left again, so we won't spend too much time on it, but it is just brilliant.
Yeah, and the fact that Donna has to commit suicide to save the day.
And she's the reason why she turns left?
Yep.
It's just... It's horrible.
Oh.
It's brilliant, but it's horrible. It's...
Turn Left is just... People compare it. I think there's an episode of Buffy that they compare it to, and they're like, I mean, I haven't seen that episode. Would you say this is better than that?
Oh, much better. Like, I can see the comparison. And the Buffy one's a very good episode, but like, it has nothing on Turn Left.
Yeah. Turn Left is just unbelievable.
Especially coming after midnight.
Yeah, the fact that you got two of the greatest episodes of Doctor Who ever back to back, and they're both experimental.
And both written by the same man.
And both by Russell, and they're both different, and they both paint humanity in a horrible light is unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, man.
That's one I'm really looking forward for Jake to see.
I think Jake's going to love Turn Left.
Yeah.
All right. I think, yeah, before we dwell too much on it, we'll move on to The Deadly Assassin.
Right. Now, you may have noticed we've jumped a lot in time from the Mind Robber. The reason why is the Pertwee era is the perfect example. Well, it's great, but perfect example of... I'm not going to say formulaic because it's great, but Pertwee era, I wouldn't say is experimental.
As Terrence Dicks said, evil mastermind, alien invasion. That's about it.
Yes. So, in the 70s, Doctor Who had been established as what it was. And the Pertwee era especially showed how to perfect the formula. The Pertwee era had shown how to sort of perfect those basic... Like it's the perfect... Pertwee era is the great example of how to nail the basics of Doctor Who. It's great. But then we get the Hinchcliffe era, which delves into more more ballsy sci-fi stuff, and the majority of it is in its own formulaic with some great ideas. But then Genesis, amazing. Pyramids of Mars, great. Seeds of Doom, so many great ideas within a Doctor Who formula. But then when Sarah Jane leaves and Tom Baker goes to Gallifrey by himself, the Deadly Assassin, it's basically Robert Holmes saying, let's do something that we've never seen before. in 14 seasons, and basically this episode shows the Doctor as ruthless, as predatorial.
He drowns a man, yeah.
I think it's the opposite. The guy tries to drown him.
Yeah.
But the Doctor in this episode is more vicious and more aggressive and more fucked up than we'd ever seen him.
Because people bring up in New Who, like, this, they sort of don't like the idea of, when the Doctor's alone he becomes psychotic. Have they seen The Deadly Assassin? Like, it's...
This is also a story that brings back the Master, but this Master in The Deadly Assassin is nothing like Delgado. This
same character, but it's different.
another ballsy move to completely change the Master and make him into this undead zombie-like, again, like I say, predatorial character. This episode also completely changes the Time Lords from being this angelic sort of overlooking sort of figure.
Yeah, they completely not interfering. They're like gods, but they're not like Greek gods where they actually get involved. They're just separate.
Yeah.
They're their own quiet
The
thing.
the Deadly Assassin establishes them as some people say, stuffy politicians, but the way it's handled by Holmes in The Deadly Assassin is absolutely outstanding.
Good Gallifrey stories, man.
I don't know if I want to reveal all of my opinions on The Deadly Assassin in this video,
Save some of it.
but basically to sum it up, pretty much everything in episode 2 and 3 is some of the best Doctor Who ever.
Yeah, it's so good.
That moment when the Doctor looks into the ice lake and sees the clown, I almost shit myself.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
If you think that Tom Baker's Doctor is only defined by his funny dialogue, go watch The Deadly Assassin. He is absolutely just a killer in that episode.
Absolutely. Go check it out. It's brilliant. Yeah. One of the best episodes.
Yeah.
Cool. Moving on. We'll move on to the Lodger/closing time.
Craig stories.
The Craig stories
Gareth Roberts.
by Gareth Roberts, who's a very functional writer.
Very fun too.
He's very fun. Very, very fun. Yes. I really like The Lodger.
So do I.
I really, really like The Lodger. I think it's a neat little character story, and I like how Matt Smith is very sciencey and very...
Here we go. So, as a kid, obviously still to this day, love Tennant, favourite Doctor. And as a kid, like, Tennant was the Doctor to me. So going into Series 5, I had this sort of lukewarm feeling towards Matt Smith because of that. That's natural. Whenever you have your favourite Doctor and then they get replaced by someone else, that's bound to happen. The Lodger was the episode where I fell in love with Matt Smith as the Doctor. Matt Smith in the Lodger is so funny and so entertaining.
He like, obviously he nailed his entrance in the 11th hour, but The Lodger, when it's kind of like this quiet, like very domestic episode, Matt Smith is so good in it. Yeah, it's this one where it's not game changing in any way. It's kind of simple. Craig in The Lodger is quite likable in The Lodger.
In his own way.
Yeah. Because it was before James Corden became like a big thing, and it was just kind of an affable everyman.
Yeah.
And it worked against the.
It's a camp little story, but I just love it.
Yeah, it's
basically one of my favorites of Series 5.
It's basically turning Doctor Who into a buddy sitcom.
Yeah.
Like the Everyman and the Alien. It's basically like Mork and Mindy, but it's
How do you feel about the fact that Craig's upper floor was designed by the Silence?
The silence element, yeah, we can take it or leave it. The fact that it's an alien thing just in the attic, that's such a Doctor Who.
Yeah, that no one knows
Yeah. And there's like this mold on the ceiling. It's like, no, that's not mold. That's like alien residue or whatever the explanation was. That's what I like about The Lodger, is it's a very simple, homebound story, but it's very fun. It's harmless. Closing Time is pretty much the same thing, except the threat is the Cyberman, but there is no threat.
Okay. Closing Time. We'll get to the Cybermen. Let's forget about the Cybermen first. As a buddy episode, it does go too far, but it's entertaining enough for those people that liked The Lodger.
I would say it's entertaining up to a point. It's like the final sort of 10 minutes that kind of ruin it for me.
I'll get to it. That dynamic between Matt Smith and James Corden in Closing Time, it's wink wink, we know that you liked The Lodger. That does annoy me, but it's entertaining enough. However, it burns me that James Corden beat the Cybermen with the power of love because he thought of his baby. One of the worst endings to an episode ever.
Because these aren't the Mondasian Cybermen. These are the Cybermen who were established in the parallel world with these horrible, nightmarish Frankenstein machines, right? You telling me that none of those people, while being chopped up, were thinking of their loved ones at all? None of them? It's just stupid. It was experimental, but it was stupid. And in fact, Closing Time wasn't experimental because it was doing something that was done the previous season much, much better. I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Closing Time for now. I'm going to save my rant for when we get
So basically what I'm trying to say is The Lodger is how to do that episode. Yeah. Closing Time is not.
Yep. Yep, that's fair enough. Now, we'll move on to Kinder/Snake Dance.
Right, the Mara stories. Now, I haven't actually seen Kinder. I've seen clips from it. Kinder is a story that focuses on the Fifth Doctor and Tegan as characters, and also features Eirich and Nissa, but that's irrelevant. I haven't seen the entire thing, but from what I've seen, I can see why it's so divisive as an episode. Some people describe the Mara stories as pseudo-intellectual bollocks. However, some others think it's experimental brilliance. Now, I have seen Snake Dance, but that was about 5 years ago, and I remember enjoying it. But I think I may need to watch that episode again, as well as watching Kinder in full, because it seems like one of the most intriguing ideas in Doctor Who, but I don't know how I feel about it, really.
No, yeah, it's the same for me. It's been a while since I've seen it. I do, like, there are certain visual elements to it, like the snake, for example, coming up and facing them. But, like, I can't remember what the actual episode itself was about.
Yeah, it plays with a lot of Buddhism culture.
Yeah, I think it's one I'm going to have to re-watch before I can give a proper review of it, which I'm sure, because I imagine the plan is to chip our way through all of Classic Who eventually.
To put it in perspective, Kinder and Snake Dance, it's kind of like, it's a lot like some of those Moffat episodes where it's divisive because some people love its sort of experimental, mental side of it, like very psychedelic and strange and thoughtful, but then other people think it's just trash because it's pretentious and trying to tell you that it's intelligent, but it really isn't. And yeah, I think when Moffat says that the Davison eras were his most nostalgic, I can see why, because some of his stories feel like they are attributing themselves from the likes of Kinder and Snake Dance. Yeah,
that's a fair statement. Yeah. All right, because we'll go more in depth into that one somewhere down the line. Don't worry. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to Sleep No More.
Horrible. One of the worst episodes. It's absolute garbage. I hate it.
Yep. All right, moving on to...
I just want to mention though, I do get the ambition of having the hidden footage paranormal activity shit, but they did it about 20 years too late, and having Sleep Dust as your villain is shit. So Mark Gatiss, you fucked up big time.
I thought that was one of the worst episodes I'd ever seen, and then a couple weeks later... All right, moving on to Black Orchid.
Okay, Black Orchid is possibly the most gentlemanly British episode ever, because basically they go to I can't remember which era it is in, but it's in Britain back in the days, and Peter Davison plays cricket. This is a pure historical. It's the only one that wasn't in the 60s. So we hadn't seen one since the Highlanders, and we haven't seen one since. So this was experimental at the time because pure historicals weren't a thing. Black Orchid has a very divisive reception. It's a 2-part story, actually. I think there's a reason why they decided to make it 2 parts, just in case, because they're thinking, well, maybe someone might not like this, so we'll make it a shorter one. I saw it 10 years ago, and I remember it. I remember parts of it. There's a doppelganger plot with Nissa. She's another person in that time period that looks exactly like her. There's weird dancing scenes that feel like they were only there to establish the setting. And I remember feeling the side characters felt very sort of cartoony British gentlemanly like. However, I don't remember enough about the plot to remember whether or not it's good. But I don't know. I watched the other day. I watched the clip of Davison playing cricket, and similar to The Lodger, where Matt Smith plays football, it has that same sort of feeling to it. Putting the Doctor in a human situation.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I'm very much the same in terms of I remember vague things about it, but this is one. The thing is, the Davison era is kind of a difficult one for me to watch because Cages Androzani is my favourite Doctor Who episode story ever.
But then the rest of it's just kind of forgettable.
Yeah. So a lot of Davison's era sort of blends together in my mind. So later down the line, I will rewatch these episodes and give a more thorough and in-depth breakdown. But yes, I do vaguely remember the episode, and the fact that it was the first pure historical is something to... In 20 years or so is... Yeah, it is quite something. So yeah, it was interesting. I can't say much about it because I really don't remember that much about it. I know I've seen it because I've seen all of the Davison era. But
it definitely feels out of place. I would say that for the era it's in, it definitely feels out of place. But
for sure.
For some people, might be refreshing because
it's
not trying to be a naff alien story.
Well, again, Warriors of the Deep. All right. Heaven Sent.
Okay. Heaven Sent, like Midnight and Turn Left, is one of the best episodes of Doctor Who ever. The way that it portrays all forms of life and death and your entire existence within the eyes of one character is absolutely outstanding.
Stunning piece of television. It enraptured me like no other episode ever has. I was just, from the go, I was just like, what is this? What's happening? What? And it was stringing me along the whole time. And then it has one of my favourite cliffhangers ever, where it's like, tell him I came back the long way round. And there's pounds across and it's Gallifrey. And I nearly cried because I was like, 10 years I've been waiting for... I did my time. 12 years in Azkaban. That's what it felt like. But no, the episode itself is so brilliant, and it just shows what a phenomenal directed Rachel Talalay is. What a brilliant... the score alone for that one episode is one of some of my favourite Murray Gold stuff.
It's the best directed episode of Doctor Who. It's the best scored episode of Doctor Who, and it's quite possibly the best performance by any Doctor in any episode. Peter Capaldi in Heaven Sent is perfect.
It's an hour-long monologue, and it's incredibly entertaining.
Yeah.
He's such a presence. Again, this is one we will delve so deep into when we get to it. But for now, we're on a time limit, so we have to move on. The greatest show in the galaxy.
Now this is one that I have watched recently. The greatest show in the galaxy for me represents why I like the Seventh Doctor and his era so much. The Seventh Doctor is known as the Dark Clown, and the greatest show in the galaxy is a reflection of his character in a world. I feel like the greatest show in the galaxy, the entire cast members, the villains, the way the story plays out, the actual location of the story, the fact that it's in a circus, just everything about that story, even Ace's point of view in it, it is a reflection of the Seventh Doctor's character.
And not only that, it's a metatextual analysis of the show and its state itself. Something that at one point was the biggest thing is now on its last legs, and it's got one fan left who keeps coming to it. It's the show making an episode about itself. And how depressing a state it was in, and how it was being disregarded by the BBC, and the general public were kind of losing it, but there was still that core, hardcore fans, but they were kind of pulling away after McCoy's first season, and brilliant.
And Greatest Show in the Galaxy is a big fuck you to Michael Grade, because it basically shows that the Doctor Who, when it's on the brink of cancellation, produces some of its best ideas. The clown from that episode is one of my favourite villains of Doctor Who. Scary, manipulative, brilliantly acted. The Seventh Doctor in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy is wonderfully dark, and just like the way he manages to balance the clownish side of his season 24 character, but then putting this sort of edge on it, this really like thought-provoking character into the Doctor, just showing something that we'd never seen before, puts the Who back in Doctor Who. I love, and just everything about Greatest Show in the Galaxy is what I love about the Seventh Doctor. That's all I got to say, basically. And as an experimental episode, it's brilliant.
Genius, utter genius. Check it out if you haven't already. And finally, Scherzo. Now, some of you may not have heard of Scherzo. I imagine a lot of you will have, but some of you might not have. Would you like to explain?
So, in constructing this list of experimental, I thought I would do a balance of classic and new Who, but I also thought I may mention one Big Finish audio. Scherzo is a Big Finish audio featuring the 8th Doctor and Charlie Pollard when they go into something called the Divergent Universe. Big, complicated storyline that you will have to have listened to audios to understand, but basically, in this episode, they are by themselves, and this episode is written by Rob Sherman, who did Dalek and many other great audios. This episode puts the Doctor and the companion in an environment where there is nothing but sound.
But even then, there's no sound until the enemy, because they think they hear screams and stuff, but I don't want to give too much away, but it's not quite what it seems, but there's literally nothing, no sight, no sound. They can feel each other, and that's it. They can feel and hear each other. And it just delves darker and darker into, because it's basically just them in a nowhere space. It grinds them down, and we get to know quite a bit about both their individual psyches and where they're at. And it's like Paul McGann's voice is chilling in it. And there's a couple scenes where, like specifically the part 3 cliffhanger is. It's sickening, but it's brilliant. Rob Sherman's a genius.
Yeah. It's a perfect story. It's a story that pretty much would probably only work on audio because you need to be blind to actually feel the limits that these characters have. And it's probably my favorite depiction of a Doctor-companion romance, on par with Human Nature, The Family of Blood.
That's kind of an exception.
Yeah.
He's not really the Doctor.
Yeah. And I love the way, basically in this story, Charlie Pollard, the companion, shows you the human perspective of loving the Doctor. And then the Doctor shows you the really, really fucked up Time Lord perspective on this. And their clashing of their beliefs creates chaos. And it's magnificent to listen to. It is horribly dark. And if you haven't listened to a Big Finish audio before,
Probably not a good one to start with.
probably not the best to start with, but if you're looking for something experimental, Scherzo is what I would suggest.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And of all the Big Finish audios I've listened to so far, it's my favourite.
Yeah. It's tied first with Davros for me. I love Davros. Davros is a good one.
Yeah, another one I've considered having on this list, but I'm sure we'll tackle Davros at some other point.
Yeah, and there's a few other experimental episodes that we didn't mention here that when we get to them, I'm sure we can mention, hey, they could have been on this list for this reason, that reason, and the other thing. But hopefully you all enjoyed watching this deconstruction or brief, just ramble really on a whole bunch of different experimental stories. Specifically you, Cromwell, thank you. This is for you. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope it kind of was what you were after. We really, really appreciate any donations and anyone who just subscribes and comments and watches our stuff. It really, really helps. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you would like to suggest us a long-form video to do for you, of anything you want, just check out our Patreon, give it a consideration, because we'd love to do as many videos as we possibly can, but there is only a limit to how much time we have, and we like to take time out of our day to reward the most loyal of our followers, because we think it's good to give back to the people that support us, because I'd love to. There's so many things I'd love to do on this channel, and hopefully we will get around to all of them. So that's all I got to say about that.
We appreciate you watching, and hopefully you enjoyed Cromwell. And if you want to support us, patreon.com/GenesisVandrazani. And I suppose all that's left is to say we'll see you next time.